Countdown, right? You just want me to start talking when it hits 0?
That's perfect.
Okay. Will do. Are my glasses in the appropriate place that I don't look like, you know.
Wait a minute.
What?
I'll tell you what.
What?
Don't do that.
Don't do what?
What you just said.
You see that come off the air? See that monitor? Because I can't see his clock.
So you're going to give me a countdown?
Kathy,
Nope.
do you see this?
Can I see what?
The TV screen.
Here, can you
No,
see that?
I can see the TV, but that's about all I can do.
Can't really see it. I can give.
Well, what? When it goes blank, I start talking?
I think Colleen's going to give you a countdown.
I'll let you know, Kathy.
Okay.
You just tell me this. We're on 106 right here.
All right, we're a minute to go. Wow. Good luck, everybody. We're all going to be superstars.
Good luck, Andy.
You as well.
Thanks.
See, a
Well,
ton of
hope
fun.
so.
Hey,
We're gonna
quiet
show
on-
it.
Quiet on the set.
Quiet on set.
I'm just gonna point to you, Kathy, when he's gone on.
Okay, do it high so I'll see it. Okay.
And then you-
Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is, and my name is Kathy Benuck. Tonight's show features a live debate between the candidates running to represent District 9 in the New Hampshire State Senate. With me tonight is Democratic nominee Attorney Lee Nyquist of New Boston and Republican nominee Mr. Andy Sanborn of Bedford. Attorney Nyquist has been a civil trial attorney for 33 years, is chairman of the state's Unemployment Advisory Council, and for several years has been the New Boston town moderator. Mr. Sanborn has a background in corporate finance and economics, is a small business and restaurant owner, and has served one term in the New Hampshire Senate, representing what until recently was District 7. Both gentlemen have appeared on 2 previous Tell It Like It Is shows, so I will not use precious time tonight to again provide their full biographies. Those shows were titled Race for the New Hampshire Senate and Final Showdown for State Senate Seat. Please go to the BCTV website at www.bedfordtv.com to watch those shows. Simply go to Video on Demand for Channel 16, enter Tell It Like It Is in the search box, and you will then find the listings for the 4 shows. Also, please visit the candidates' websites for additional information on each. Attorney Nyquist's website is www.nyquistforsenate.com. Mr. Sanborn's website is www.andysanborn.com. The format for tonight's debate is a simple one. No questions were provided in advance to either candidate. So that more topics can be discussed, there will not be candidate rebuttals with each question. Instead, after all questions have been asked and answered, each candidate will be given uninterrupted time to rebut any comments made by his opponent. Both candidates will be asked the same questions and will each have 2 minutes to answer a question. A coin toss was held just before we went live tonight to determine who would be the respondent to the first question. The winner of the coin toss then had the option to elect that his opponent instead be first. I arbitrarily made the decision to assign the heads or tails status based on the alphabetical order of the candidate's last name. Thus, Attorney Nyquist was assigned heads and Mr. Sanborn was assigned tails. The winner of the coin toss was Andy Sanborn, and he has elected to be the first to answer the first question. With each subsequent question, we will reverse the order of who responds first. People's opinions differ as to whether it is most favorable to be the first or the last in giving rebuttal or closing statements. Thus, a second coin toss was held to determine who will be the first to give his rebuttal. The winner must accept that first position. The result of the coin toss is that Lee Nyquist will deliver his rebuttal first. Rebuttal time is to be used to address issues already discussed. Rebuttal times will be 4 minutes per candidate. We will then transition to closing statements when each candidate will make his final comments. I am reversing the order in which closing statements will be offered from the order of rebuttal. Thus, Andy Sanborn will be the first to speak and Lee Nyquist will be last. We do have a small in-studio audience tonight. I'll ask that they refrain from any speaking, audible reactions, or applause throughout the debate. And please, everybody, turn off all cell phones. So with that said, gentlemen, good luck, and we'll start our debate.
Thank you,
Thank you
Kathy.
very much.
Okay, Andy, you are the first person to answer the question, and question one is this. It's actually a three-part question. Last month, 47 state departments, agencies, and commissions submitted to the governor their budget proposals for fiscal year 2014-15. The result is a spreadsheet of 14,844 lines that would increase the state budget by a whopping 19% to $12 billion from this year's budget of $10 billion. New Hampshire Health and Human Services is looking for a 29% budget increase to increase its spending from $1.1 billion to $4.8 billion. The University of New Hampshire system is looking for an 89% increase to restore $100 million in taxpayers' funding. The Public Utilities Commission is looking for a 145% increase, with the hope that the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, known as RGGI, will bring in $45 million in fiscal year 12-13. So far, it has only brought in $5.7 million this year. If elected, how will you react to a budget $2 billion higher than now? What will you propose to reduce it? And do you see what appears as an inability of government to reduce spending as an incentive for voters to vote yes on question one on the state ballot to prohibit the institution of a state income tax?
Thank you so much for the question. Everyone tuning in tonight, I really appreciate the fact you've taken the time to come listen to me and Attorney Nyquist really talk about what we perceive to be state government. You know, this is a very complex and large question, and I'm not sure we could answer it in just 2 minutes, but let's see if we can't do our best. You know, New Hampshire has a history of looking for a specific budget every year of what's called a maintenance budget. So there's always that expectation that all the agencies will come in and essentially put all of their dreams on the pie plate and ask the legislature to give them everything they could possibly want. You know, when I was in the legislature last year, we passed legislation to specifically say this type of budgeting isn't appropriate and shouldn't be used. And this is the reason why. To see a state come in and the agency heads collectively to come in looking for $2 billion of more money in the middle of a recession when people are struggling so much just to pay their bills, feed their family, and put something away, honestly, I think is inappropriate. What we need to do in the legislature is really go back and look at the function of creating a budget. You know, after this election, and I hope my good friend over Lamont Tang actually gets the nod and becomes our next governor, we'll be working on a budget from the governor's side, and then it'll fall over to the legislature, where both the House and the Senate will be able to do it. I believe we'll be able to make a realistic, rational budget that lives within the means, just like you all have to do every day. And that's the big part about budgeting. And what I bring to this is an understanding as a business owner that we have to live within our means. We have to understand what our priorities are and work to them. Specifically as it relates to the questions, to be quickly, because we only have 2 minutes, is, you know, my reaction is that's typically how government looks. They always have their hand out and want more and more money. And do I believe we can come back in and make a budget similar to what we had this past year? I absolutely believe that we can. And if I earn your support and get elected, I'll make sure that we do. And our ability to answer question one is really predicated on these types of challenges of reining in our government and making sure it lives within its means and spends your tax dollars wisely.
Lee?
Yes, good evening, voters of Bedford. What a privilege it is to have the opportunity to be here with my opponent, Andy and Kathy Benuck. This is our third time together now, Kathy and the wonderful staff and leadership here at Bedford Cable Television. But most importantly, thank you to the voters of Bedford and the other 13 towns. You've been wonderful, and I look forward to the opportunity of representing you in the State Senate District 9. It will be the honor of my life, and I look forward to it. I am a fiscal conservative. I have never seen or heard of a tax that I like. I am unabashedly opposed to the imposition of any broad-based tax, a sales tax, or an income tax. I am solidly behind living within our revenue needs. Our state will have its certain revenues through the existing tax structure that we have. And the important thing is that we take that considerable revenue and prioritize it correctly. That is the important thing. And my first priorities are focusing on jobs in the economy like a laser. We should incentivize and partner government with small business in particular to raise all boats so that our economy and the revenue for our business tax structure increases. And we should prioritize public education, particularly post-secondary education, the rights of the disabled, and make sure that we are not downshifting the tax burden from the state artificially to the towns so that our overall tax burden is even higher than it otherwise would be. So I think that we have to just take the revenue that we have, meet the needs of the agencies as best we can, and the wish lists just are not relevant. Thank you very much.
Okay, Lee, you'll be answering the next question first. In August, the New Hampshire unemployment rate jumped to 5.7%, an increase from May's figure of 5%. Only 2 sectors grew out of the 11 broad categories tracked by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Financial services added about 500 jobs, government added 1,700 jobs. Both the construction and the manufacturing sectors lost 700 jobs each. Professional and business services lost 800, and education and health lost 2,400 jobs. Over 5,000 New Hampshire jobs have been lost since May. I personally am having a hard time figuring out why the new jobs seem to be limited to government, with 1,700 jobs added since May. What does New Hampshire need to do to encourage our existing employers to add people to their payrolls and to attract new business investments in our state?
Well, the most important thing is for government to partner with small business, to listen carefully to the creative ideas that our small business community has to, as I said before, incentivize. And tax credits to small businesses for creative programs and technology should be prioritized so that these businesses will be able to grow and grow our economy and increase our jobs. I've been the chair of the Unemployment Compensation Advisory Council, as you suggested. In that role, we brought business leaders and labor together in 2 very important instances. First, in 2008, after the crash of the commercial banks, the Unemployment Trust Fund was plummeting into the red, and business made wonderful concessions that were necessary to bring us back into the black, as did labor. I look forward to being a senator who is bipartisan, who is collegial, and who reaches out to both Republicans and Democrats, and particularly to small business. My motto will be that I will ask the question every time, is it good for business and is it good for the worker? And if the answer is it's good for only one community, I will not be in favor of it. I will be in favor of it when it's good for both communities, and that's what's good for New Hampshire. We do have a lower unemployment rate than most states in the country, but we do have to have these creative ideas to move us ahead and make sure that business is able to create new jobs, particularly in the private sector, so that the citizens of our state will be fully, adequately employed, and we can continue to raise the revenue through the existing business taxes that we have. You have my word that I will be focusing on the economy like a laser and creating jobs to the extent that that is possible in New Hampshire without raising taxes.
Andy?
Thank you so much. You know, this is one of those places where Attorney Nyquist and I seem to disagree. You know, I don't believe that government creates jobs. I don't think it's the role of government to create jobs, and we need to look to the small business community to actually do that job. And what our government can do essentially is realize that it needs to get out of the way and allow our small employers to grow and to expand. Attorney Nyquist was right that he chaired the Unemployment Compensation Board, where we saw the largest increase of taxes that we've ever seen as business owners. As a business owner, no one ever called me up, and if you're a business owner, I'm sure no one ever called you up when you oversaw a 300% increase in your unemployment tax. You know, that doesn't create jobs, that creates government jobs. You know, as we heard from Kathy, our moderator just now, the only place that seems to be growing in job creation is government jobs. 1,700 up, while 3,300 are lost in our private sector. It's about focusing. It's about understanding the role of government. You know, when I hear Attorney Nyquist talk about incentivizing, you know, that's kind of a speak for let's raise taxes on the business community and go give money away somewhere else. You know, that's not the role of our government. The role of our government is to make sure that the playing field is equal and level. And then we can negotiate if our feet should be closer or further away from it. You know, job creation is a tough thing. And seeing that we really haven't seen a lot of new job creation in our state is very indicative of just how difficult it is out there right now. Every single one of us knows someone that's struggling and trying to find a way to make it work. As your senator, I'll work to keep your taxes low, to push back on excessive regulations, and allow the business community to do what it knows how to do best, and that's the business community creating jobs, not government creating jobs. You know, we have a lot of things going on and a lot of things great in our state. Our unemployment's lower than it is in many other states, but we can do such a better job by thinking how we used to operate and letting our businesses just operate.
Thank you. Okay, Andy, you'll be answering this. A feature of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, is that it will expand Medicaid eligibility to add up to 50,000 people to New Hampshire Medicaid at a cost that could be as high as $1.76 billion over the next 10 years. In the early years, it will be funded by the federal government, but that will not be permanent. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that states cannot be forced to accept the Medicaid expansion. Thus, many people think that New Hampshire should instead request block grants in exchange for participating in Medicaid expansion, which would involve fewer federal strings being attached and allow New Hampshire to develop its own solutions. What are your thoughts on this? And part two, 10 New Hampshire hospitals now have a lawsuit against the state of New Hampshire to make the state reverse its cuts in Medicaid reimbursements to hospitals that started back in 2006. Should these federally reimbursed funds be reinstated to New Hampshire hospitals?
You know, Obamacare, you know, we talk about, again, my friend, Attorney Nyquist and his running mate, President Obama, who wants to come down and force the biggest tax increase in your life, 37 new taxes. Completely uncontainable, uncontrollable, and not what we as voters in New Hampshire want. You know, mandating to our local communities is just the wrong thing. And obviously it's been supported also by Mr. Nyquist's running mate, Maggie Hassan, as governor. You know, she tried to introduce Maggie Care, which again was a completely government-created healthcare system. It's not right for New Hampshire. It's not what we want. Now, there's no question that as a senator, I've worked so hard to try and cut down our health insurance costs. At its core, that's how it started, right? The Affordable Care Act. And I'm still trying to find out some part of that's affordable, because all it is the Democrats giving more and more taxes every day. You know, I try to create legislation, and if I'm lucky enough to get your support and get back, I will force through this legislation to allow insurance to be bought across state lines. There's no reason at all that our state today has less choices for health care than virtually any other state in the nation. It's been something that's been brought out from what then was Governor Jeanne Shaheen, who brought us and reduced the amount of insurance we could have in our state. You know, as it relates to the $300 million, I do believe in block grants. I believe that our state will do such a better job than what the government will do, because I believe in a smaller government. Overall, this is indicative, again, of what the government does. They hand a carrot out to show you a bunch of money and say, but it's going to stop. What happens when that $300 is all done? You know, our government's going to come looking for you directly to see if you want to increase your taxes, and I just don't think it's right. We need to find an overall healthcare solution. I've been working with Elliott, I've been working with CMC and the doctors around this state to try and understand what our true healthcare needs are, and I'm confident that we can come up with a solution that does not include raising your taxes and reducing your choices, because that's just wrong for the state of New Hampshire.
Lee?
Yes, thank you very much, Kathy. It is absolutely vital that the essence of government protects health care for individuals. Senator Sanborn, when he was Senator Sanborn, and the Tea Party legislature defunded close to $300 million for our hospitals across the state of New Hampshire. It basically was a $300 million biennial tax increase for which he has not taken responsibility. The Elliott Hospital, perhaps our foremost hospital together with CMC here in the Manchester area, is losing $18 million a year. one day before its fiscal budget was due, it had allocated the $18 million that had always been provided to it through Medicaid reimbursements, and it was stripped unannounced by the legislature. What happened, as you well know, is that well over 1,000 jobs, and Kathy has expressed her concern about the loss of jobs in New Hampshire, well over 1,000 healthcare jobs in our most important industry, the healthcare industry. It brings the most money into New Hampshire, it has the most employees, and it has been absolutely critical that our Tea Party legislature, with the concurrence of former Senator Sanborn, did this to us. We can't treat our best industries that way, particularly when it's their goal to protect the health of each and every one of our citizens. None of us ever knows when we are going to be the person who needs the attention of hospitals and medical providers, and it is absolutely vital that these funds be restored to a level where the hospitals are able to survive, the employees that provide the vital care, particularly in emergency, to our citizens and patients is there. We cannot have a system that is starving our hospitals, and I will serve in the Senate to make sure that the rights of patients are protected.
On Saturday, October 20th, there will be rallies held across the country, including in Concord, New Hampshire, to oppose the U.S. Health and Human Services mandate included in the Affordable Care Act that requires employee health plans to include free contraception, sterilization, and abortion-inducing drugs, regardless of moral or religious convictions. Thus, religious employers like Catholic schools and hospitals will be forced to provide services that directly contradict Catholic teaching. If you were to attend the rally on Saturday, what would you say to attendees who believe that their rights and beliefs are being violated? Lee?
I would say that the most important liberty that we as New Hampshire citizens have is the right of women and families to make their own choices relating to their own medical care. And that includes, very importantly, contraception and family planning. Think about this. An employer engaged in the secular workforce has health insurance, and an employee pays thousands of dollars into it, sharing that burden with the employer. And then the employer is allowed to say, well, you can't have the contraception health coverage that you've had since 2001, in which 98% of all New Hampshire and American women use at one time or another. That doesn't make sense. It's not fair. And contraception is a vital service that must be provided under private health plans. Indeed, those who can least afford contraception would be put in a situation where they can't afford it. It's important to understand that I respect the judgment of the Catholic Church and the practicing Catholics and those that might advise their families and their daughters that they don't want to choose contraception or they don't have the panoply of rights to terminate a pregnancy. But I take the issue very personally because I am still lucky to have a mother, 90 years old, a wife for over 29 years, and 3 daughters aged 25, 18, and 5. And I respect these people so much that in consultation with their medical providers, with their family, and certainly their clergy, they should have that right, and it should not be taken away from them by the legislature. There is not a problem with the employers because they can choose to engage in their own moral practices as they see it, and as I said, I have nothing but the greatest respect for that. Thank you, Kathy.
Andy?
You know, Attorney Nyquist talks about respecting the judgments of the church, but he doesn't want to allow them to have the respect of their personal choice and their personal freedom. You know, the real question that comes down to is, you know, do you believe in people's true choice of freedom? You know, I'm a member of Elizabeth Eaton Church, and you know, as an Irish Catholic, I believe in the church's right to spend the money as it sees fit. Contraceptive, you know, it's a real heated argument we've been talking about in the legislature, and you know, both sides seem to have some real concerns about it. But at its core, we're talking about whether or not government, and obviously Mr. Nyquist feels strongly that government should have the right to enforce its beliefs on you, no matter what your religious beliefs are, and that's just wrong. For me, it even becomes more of a personal issue. You know, at the same time, we're talking about whether or not government should force the Catholic Church to provide people's contraceptives, we're telling people that we don't have enough money and we're kicking kids out of wheelchairs. You know, we have to understand what our priorities are. And I believe we need to look at those who truly have most needs in our state, the developmentally disabled, the kids and the families that are struggling every single day to make something happen and to make it work. And those are the people we need to support first. And if people have other luxuries that they would like to have in their life, they have every right to have them. Nothing in the legislation that the federal government or the state government has stopped or impeded at any level whatsoever on people's personal right if they want to have contraceptive, use it, or buy it. All it's saying is we're not going to force, the government is not going to force our religious institutions to have to do something that's just against what their beliefs are. It's a very simple thing. You can go down to Walmart today and get birth control for $9. Everyone has that right, and we need to keep that right for those who want it. But forcing government to tell our religious institutions what they can and can't do, that's just too much.
What question do you think that your opponent has so far failed to fully answer to the voters of the Senate District 9 during his campaign? Andy?
I think the question that the voters deserve to hear from Mr. Nyquist, actually there's two of them. The first thing is, here's a gentleman who has said in this studio, sitting here with our great moderator Kathy tonight, that he thinks he has promised to raise your taxes. And yet he seems to skirt around it by saying, he doesn't support a sales tax or an income tax. But I have to point out that Attorney Nyquist has not signed the pledge, and I call on him tonight. That if he means what he says to the voters of this district, he needs to sign the pledge against a sales tax and an income tax. In addition to that, he needs to answer the voters as well. Sitting here saying he doesn't support a constitutional amendment making it more difficult to raise your taxes because he feels there's a necessary requirement to raise them clearly shows that we're seeing a wolf in sheep's clothing. Beyond question, right now in this economy, it is not the time to be raising taxes on people. And as a politician, as your state senator, if you allow me the opportunity to be that, I will answer your questions honestly and directly. I've been very clear about a sales tax and income tax. I don't support it. And in fact, I've signed the pledge where my opponent has it. I've also made the same statement that I will not allow our government to raise any more taxes, fees, fines, penalties, or assessments on you either. Happy to sign that pledge as well. Our government's become too big, too broad, and too bold. And this is one of those places where Attorney Nyquist and I differ. I think our government needs to be smaller and more manageable. He's trying to find ways to tax without promising whether or not he's going to or not. And that's the question beyond any question. The first one, that's what needs to be answered. Will he commit to you, the voters of New Hampshire, that he'll sign the pledge against the sales and income tax? Will he commit to you, the voters of New Hampshire, that he'll vote against every single tax, fee, fine, penalty, and assessment and work on making our government smaller and more responsive? That's the question I think you want answered tonight.
Lee?
Yes, I think that Andy needs to address the issue that was probably most cogently brought up by Rich Girard, and I think that his question of me demonstrates that he is less than reliable in telling the electorate about the positions of individuals. I pledge to the voters of the state of New Hampshire, of the town of Bedford, and those in District 9 that I am unalterably opposed to the imposition of any broad-based tax, including sales or income taxes. I have never, ever seen a tax that I like. I am a fiscal conservative. I will do everything that is humanly possible to balance our budget and provide the adequate services that government must provide, and that I know Andy agrees that it must provide, without the imposition of any taxes. And I have never suggested that I am in favor of raising taxes, nor do I believe that raising taxes is necessary. And Senator Sanborn has misrepresented my position again here tonight on that issue. He has misrepresented it to you in an unfortunate mailing that he recently sent out. And it's not surprising. Because as Rich Girard said on Thursday, September 6th in his radio show, and I quote, "I truly believe that Andy Sanborn should be a magician for his ability to engage in sleight of hand. I don't think he plays it honest. I believe I have 3 instances where I know he's been untruthful with me. I think we've seen systematic deception and misrepresentation," end quote. And I think that Andy needs to answer the question as to why he is a political magician and why, as Rich Gerard said, he engages in systematic deception and misrepresentation.
The U.S. Department of Education and the Obama administration strongly encourage states to adopt Common Core standards, which is essentially the basis for national school curriculum, national tests, and centralized education. Adoption of the standards permits states to receive race-to-the-top funding and no child left behind waivers. In return, the U.S. Department of Education has more direction and control over curricula, programs of instruction, and instructional materials. A few years ago, the New Hampshire Board of Education voted in Common Core standards for math and English. Do you support more New Hampshire involvement in Common Core standards when such may assist with much-needed educational funding, or do you perceive it as an erosion of our own control over education in New Hampshire?
Yes, thank you, Kathy. I have very much said that I am a moderate. I stand in the broad middle ground that all of us here in Bedford stand in. And we desire the most affordable public education that we can possibly have. We've risen to the second best high school in New Hampshire in just 6 years. And Memorial School, which is the most diverse school in town, has recently won the National Blue Ribbon Award. And the reason for this is that we cherish public education in Bedford. And as part of my plan to move public education ahead, I believe that we must enhance math and science curricula. And to the extent that the state has defunded aid to public education, any monies that we can lay our hands on is very, very important. And the Tea Party ideology that's represented by Andy and the folks up in Concord in the 2011-2012 legislature says that we don't want to take any federal aid because we believe that there are strings attached and that there's something bad about Washington, when what Washington is doing is partnering with New Hampshire educators, with New Hampshire students to move our public education ahead. If folks like Andy Sanborn had their way, the dropout age would be eliminated, and our 99% dropout age would return to where it was. We would have the abandonment of the opportunity to have the International Baccalaureate program here in New Hampshire. Senator Sanborn on May 1st of 2012 signed in at the Senate committee hearing saying that he was going to speak in favor of the bill that would abolish the IB program, one that had been approved and was being controlled by our local Board of Education here in Bedford.
Thanks so much, Kathy. You know, I believe that the best education happens at the local level. I'm on the President's Advisory Board for New England College in Henniker. I'm on the Dean's Advisory Board at UNH School of Law. Education is incredibly important to me, and making sure that we have the best opportunities for our children is paramount for us in all forms of school. For those who find the ability to make public school work for them, I support charter schools, I support private schooling, I support homeschooling. You know, for us, it's about the children first and making sure they get a great education. Now, do I believe that I want to see the federal government come down on us and make all these requirements? Again, this is where Attorney Nyquist and I differ. I don't believe that the federal government should be sticking its nose in it, just like I voted against and led the charge as the Senate to vote against a prohibition on IB. I mean, there are people out there that have questions, and I believe those questions should be answered with some polite dialogue. But this is a local control issue. And in that local control issue, this is a town that spent the time on IB, and they had a vote. And if they want to change it, it really should be at the local control level. You know, in addition to that, I've just heard Attorney Nyquist say, again, he didn't speak against a $2 billion increase to the state budget. He wants to put $300 million back in the hospitals. He just signed up for another $300 million to the public education system. So far, he's increased your state budget $2.6 billion just in this conversation. I get back to that conversation. Where's the money come? He neglected to say that he would not vote for, and as a voter, I think you need to hold him to the fire on that charge. Will he vote to raise your taxes? Because he continues not to answer that question. I've made that answer. I think we can live within our means. I think our government is just spending too much money and it's wasting it. And I've put legislation in repeatedly that we've been working on as a state senator to make a smaller, more efficient government, so then we can prioritize and spend what's best. But let's keep the federal government out of Bedford and out of our local schools.
Okay, gentlemen, I'd ask you to keep careful track of your time so I do not have to interrupt you. Andy, you'll be answering this first. It's safe to say that right-to-work legislation will again be before the legislature in the coming session. One of you is for it, the other is against. Please support your position and tell us what is wrong with the position of your opponent.
Thanks, Kathy. You know, as you know when you've seen me and talked to me around town, because I've gone to actually at this point, almost 5,000 individual doors. I believe politics is local and you need to show up and you need to talk to people. You know, right to work to me, as well as so many of the issues that are facing our state today, really have to do with personal freedoms and personal choice. Establishing right to work legislation will not eliminate unions in our state. It is not an attack upon units in our state. What it is giving individual employees the personal right, the personal freedom as to whether or not to have to pay into a union. I don't believe there should be compulsory payment into unions. I think it's wrong. If you think your union is doing a good job and you want to become a member or you want to pay into it, you absolutely have that right. And passage of right-to-work legislation will continue that right. You also deserve the right to make the decision to pay in or to not pay in. So therefore, based upon that premise, I would support it.
Andy? I'm sorry, Lee.
Yes. I oppose the so-called right-to-work legislation. New Hampshire has never had right-to-work legislation. We've had long success in this state with small business and labor and larger businesses partnering to enhance the rights of everyone. As I said earlier, I will be asking one question when I'm dealing with this important issue of right to work or anything else that's related to our economy, and that is what is good for business and good for the worker. And our system to date that does not have right to work has been good for business and good for workers. I've talked with many developers, people who want to bring business into New Hampshire, and nobody ever brings up the idea of right to work. They are very interested in the broad-based tax, and that's why I am unalterably opposed to the imposition of a broad-based tax. But they do not have a concern about the issue of right to work. And the most fundamental problem that I have and that we all should have with right to work is that it is a government intrusion on the liberty of employers and employees to meet their own contractual deals. What happens is that the union and the employers get together in a collective bargaining process, and they agree and they sign a contract for the benefit of the employer and the employee. And Andy Sanborn and his Tea Party legislators in 2011 and 2012, and the thing I fear the most is if folks like him are back up in Concord, they'll continue to try to erode this liberty that employers and employees have. And it's a road to the bottom because the New Hampshire economy outshines that of probably 45 states. And all of the right-to-work states, without exception, have higher unemployment and less attractive business climates than New Hampshire.
Time.
So I am opposed.
The next questions you will have only 1 minute to answer in order to ask a couple of more. Back before the legislature this year will likely be a proposed constitutional amendment to require a 3/5 supermajority vote to impose any new fee or tax. What is your opinion on this? Lee? 1 minute.
Yes, I do not believe that our Constitution is the place for revenue. The legislature has the exclusive role and the job to raise revenue. So I don't think that there should be anything in there about requiring the state to raise revenue, and there shouldn't be anything in there limiting the state's opportunity to raise revenue. When our legislature believes that there are needs that need to be prioritized and that the revenue is available, then I think that it's not a place to be in the Constitution. And to have a constitutional impediment to the ability of the legislature to raise revenue would impede our bonding rates, Moody's and Standard & Poor's. What would happen to our state's infrastructure? What would happen to our capital budget?
Time. Andy?
As most of you seen, typically anytime these liberal politicians have the opportunity and the ability to raise your taxes, they just love doing it. And I've made it very clear. Sales tax, income tax, fees, fines, penalties, assessment. We need to find every way possible to make it more difficult for politicians to take more money out of your pocket. And this is obviously where Attorney Nyquist and I really disagree. You know, he specifically said right here in this room in an interview that he didn't support, which he says tonight, he does not support making it harder to allow politicians to raise your taxes. Because he did specifically say, because he wanted to make sure that we had the promise to raise taxes that are necessary to do it. You know, he has said on a repeated basis, and I know he doesn't like to hear it, but you know, that's a part of what running for politics is, being honest with the voters, being direct and answer their questions. This is an issue that I believe that if you are very concerned about your taxes going up, if you're very concerned about new fees, fines, penalties, and assessments, you would support this constitutional amendment, and I will.
1 minute answer again, please. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, participation by New Hampshire was passed on the premise that it would provide incentives for the use of alternative energy and would provide a lot of revenue to the state. This cap and tax plan has fallen short on both, and we continue to have some of the highest energy costs in the nation. Is it time to repeal New Hampshire's involvement in RGGI?
Now, we know RGGI came about when Attorney Nyquist's running mate, Maggie Hassan, wanted to try and find yet another way to raise taxes on us, people here in New Hampshire. You know, RGGI is nothing more than an excuse for as the moderator had said, a cap and trade program. You know, if we're going to be good with our environment, we have to reward people for doing the right thing, not making everyone guilty and making everyone pay. The RGGI system is a failure. It was a tax scheme brought up by the Liberal Democrats to try and find yet another way to take money out of your pocket. You know, the amount that goes towards these credits that everyone has to buy and then the taxes get passed along into your tax bill have never had a market. They've never had a place where they've worked. So it's an entirely failed system, and we should repeal it and eliminate it and return that money back to you because it's your money. We need to be good with our environment. It's incredibly important to me. So why don't we focus on rewarding those that do good versus another tax that makes it assume that everyone's bad.
Lee?
Yes, on June 6th of 2012, the State Senate voted on a committee of conference report relating to RGGI, this very important issue that we all face. And Senator Sanborn was absent without leave. He had resigned his seat. He did not vote on the RGGI bill. He is an individual who is representing the town of Benuck, who had a solemn duty to be present that day, who had a solemn duty to carry forth the mandate that the voters gave to him in November of 2010. Andy, it's not like having a job and saying, I can give you 2 weeks notice because I have a better opportunity somewhere else. You have to carry out that solemn duty to the voters of your district, the voters of District 7. And you weren't there for the RGGI vote. Where were you? You were in transit to Bedford to advance your own political career, having abandoned your fiduciary duties to the very constituents that you had asked to represent.
Okay, again, 1 minute answer. We already know that a legislative proposal has been filed to increase the state gasoline tax. We currently pay 18 cents per gallon state tax and 18.4 cents per gallon federal tax. The Democratic gubernatorial candidate has already indicated that she wants to restore a 10-cent cut in the state's cigarette tax. Do you support a gas tax increase? And what is your position on adding 10 cents to the current state cigarette tax?
I would be opposed to the imposition of a gas tax at this time. I don't think that it would be good for the creation of jobs or the economy. So as I have said before, I'm a fiscal conservative. I've never met a tax that I like, and I think I like the gas tax less than most. Now, as it relates to the cigarette tax, the Tea Party legislature that Andy Sanborn was a vital part of, in conjunction with the Speaker, Bill O'Brien of Mount Vernon, cut the cigarette tax and has cost us biannually $40 million. That's $40 million that could have gone to help the developmentally disabled, to help our post-secondary education system, and to return money to the towns to relieve property taxes. And Andy made sure that he was more concerned with helping big cigarette companies, and I would be definitely in favor of allowing that 10-cent to come back into our
Thank you,
economy.
Kathy. You know the challenge you always have when attorneys open their mouth, you're always afraid of what they might say and how they might say it. You know, let me just repeat what Mr. Nyquist just said. At this time, he doesn't want to raise the tax. He continues to dance and bob and weave like all good politicians do, because he's a great politician. He bobs and weaves about raising your taxes. He refuses to sign a pledge. He refuses to even talk about other fees, fines, penalties, or assessments. And you as voters, I think you need to be concerned about that, because his running mate, Maggie Hassan, 87 new taxes and fees, all the while she's talking about not wanting a more broad-based tax. Barack Obama, again, Mr. Nyquist's running mate, when you see the type of taxes and fees we have seen from these people, be prepared, ladies and gentlemen, it's one of the defining issues that's against us. You know, I don't believe we should be raising taxes on anyone in this environment. It's not right, it's not going to help our economy, and it's not going to help you get back to work, and that's the most important thing.
Okay, gentlemen, we need to transition to stay within our 1 hour. It is now time for your rebuttal statements, and you will each have 4 minutes. Please use your time wisely to rebut any comments by your opponent and to expand your own comments on a subject. You will be given additional time for your closing statements, so please don't use this time to ask for a vote. As determined by the pre-airtime coin toss, Lee, you will go first. Please begin.
Yes, thank you very much. By way of rebuttal, I think we have to understand that the theme of the debate tonight and the decision that you must make is, why am I, Lee Nyquist, here, and where have I been, and what do I stand for? And why is Andy Sanborn here, and where has he been, and what does he stand for? I am not a politician, and I'm going to be inviting Andy, whether he's a state senator or not, and I truly believe that he will not be, and he'll be available, to be the guest magician at my twin 5-year-old's birthday party, their 6th birthday party on May 6th. He will do very well, as Rich Girard has said. He's remarkable at sleight of hand, continuing to misrepresent his positions. Andy wants to run against a tax and spend liberal Democrat. Unfortunately, he doesn't have that opportunity. I am a fiscally conservative individual. I am unalterably opposed, and I pledge to the citizens of District 9 and the voters of Bedford that I am opposed to broad-based taxes, and that it is not my goal to raise your taxes. It is my goal to balance our budget and reprioritize within our means. And Andy Sanborn can talk about this from now until hell freezes over. And he can try to utilize the sleight of hand that Rich Girard most carefully saw and accurately saw, but he will not get away with it. And I think it is an affront to the citizens of Bedford here tonight to listen to him talk like this. I am very different. I am not a politician. I am 60 years old. I have never run for higher office. I'm a family man. I have 5 children. I spend my most meaningful time with my wife and my children. I spend much of the rest of my time working very hard at my job. I have deep roots in the community. Andy Sanborn has none. He has talked about riding around on his scooter and going to thousands of homes. And you know why he did that? Because he's cramming. He's way behind. He doesn't understand Bedford. He doesn't understand the other 13 towns. He's been living elsewhere. He violated his fiduciary duty already to his constituents when he came down to Bedford and abandoned his most important votes in the month of June. There were 15 votes on Governor Lynch's vetoes in June. Andy Sanborn was 0 for 15. He was absent without leave. And why was he? Because he wanted to be. He didn't care that he had signed a solemn oath to represent the citizens of Henniker and the many other towns. He left them high and dry, and you will notice that in the state Senate there were only 23 votes cast on any of these 15 bills. And some of the most important bills that he's talked here about tonight, he did not vote on. Now, my deep roots in the community include being an elder of the Community Church of New Boston. Back in the 1990s, I sat side by side with my good friend Ovid Lamontagne as a director of the Boy Scouts of America Daniel Webster Council. I have been a member of the Manchester Rotary Club, the oldest service club in New Hampshire. Began in 1918, and I've been a member for 19 years, and I'm endorsed by Clara Monia, one of our great Rotarians. I have well over 50 Republican endorsements, including I'm pleased to announce the co-chairs here tonight. Dave Bailey, regarded former chief of police here in Bedford. Jane Spalding, who led the ticket running for state representative in 2006 and 2008, and Willard Dodge and Roger Noonan, bedrock Republicans from the town of New Boston.
Kathy, thank you very much. You know, there's a lot of things to talk about tonight, and very obviously, Attorney Nyquist and I come from very different sides of what the future of our state is. From his support of Obamacare, to his support of raising taxes, in fact, calling them necessary. From his refusal to actually sign the pledge and show the voters that he actually won't reduce taxes. You know, he's running with a pretty interesting slate of characters. Maggie Hassan, who has a long established history, 87 taxes and fees. Barack Obama, well, we know what kind of train wreck that's been ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. You know, what I bring to this race is really focusing on these issues. Now, Mr. Nyquist brought up a couple questions. He said I missed a day at the legislature. I did. It's amazing to me that as an attorney, Lee Nyquist stands here and tells you, the voters, that he wants me to break the law, because it's a legal question. I couldn't be in that legislature because it was the law. Of course, Mr. Nyquist, you know, is no stranger to playing bob and weed with the law. We all know that the AG's office investigated him relative to improprieties over being a town moderator, the only moderator in this state that was found guilty of that type of improprieties. You know, when we also talk about who are we trying to help, I have very grave concerns. You may have seen in the press this week, in fact, my friend Rich Gerard questioned Mr. Nyquist specifically relative to an email that was leaked that he sent to all of his law partners, specifically saying he wanted to be a senator solely for the reason to take care of his clients in the firms, that he wanted to become a senator to be a, quote, advocate within the Senate just for his companies. Quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, it rolls me back on my heels to think someone would show such an unabashed desire to work from the inside for a tit for tat. That isn't what our Senate's about. And I call on Mr. Nyquist to answer that question. He's been called repeatedly. The press has asked him, and he's just mum on it. You know, we have a lot of issues here. Making sure we balance our budget, making sure our government lives within its means, making sure we can solve some of these problems. In Mr. Nyquist's perspective, he thinks bigger government, better government. He continues to refuse to say whether or not he's going to include or support these taxes. You know, he has rattled off tonight almost $3 billion in increased state spending and is yet to say a single time how he's going to pay for it. That does define who we are. You know, when I talk about endorsements and people who are supporting me, let's go down that list. Mitt Romney, Ovid Lamontagne, Frank Ginta, Charlie Bass, Roy Stewart. I have plenty of people who say, in fact, every single one of the people running for the House today on the Republican side are supporting me. You know, we went to 4,000, now almost 5,000 doors, because as opposed to sitting up in some ivory tower, just sending out glossy little pieces of paper telling people how great you are, I believe you have an obligation to stand in front of people and talk to them so you know what their concerns are. Anything else just makes you a politician in slippers. You know, Mr. Nyquist says he's not a politician. He works with Paul Hodes as a law partner. His other law partner is Jean Shaheen's husband. He self-admits he's been hanging around the State House as a clerk for 30 some odd years. Now, granted, he's never run for the office, but he's had his fingers in it for some time. And you can see from this email that he has, that I actually have a copy of right here, that specifically says he wants to become a state senator so he can advocate for his business. You know, one of his clients happens to be a liquor company that right now the Liquor Commission is under investigation for potential criminal activity with $100,000 missing in wine. Now, is that the client that Mr. Nyquist wants to represent? Sure sounds like it is. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a race about integrity. This is a race about answering your questions, working hard and representing the values that you believe in. And if you believe in the type of conservative values that has made Bedford great, then I think I'm the guy who would answer those questions.
All right, gentlemen, you will now have a strict 2 minutes each to tell voters why they should vote for you. Using reverse order from the rebuttals, Andy, please begin your closing statement right now.
Thank you so much. Kathy, thank you so much. Attorney Nyquist, appreciate the time to talk about the issues that are so important to the people in the state.
And thank you too, Andy.
You know, as a fourth-generation New Hampshire native, as a small business owner, I never wanted to be a politician, never had a sign in my yard, I'd never given money to a candidate. But about 5 years ago, I just realized that our government wasn't listening to us anymore. It wasn't respecting us. It wasn't respecting our money. Now, with a background in finance and economics, I knew that I could help bring some solutions to what's turned into a very difficult financial challenge in our state. I ran for state senate and became a state senator, so proudly so, and have served the people of this state, not one person or one town, the people of this state for 2 years. Now, granted, we also needed to make a personal decision. You know, my wife, Lori, who so many of you met, who I love to death, I mean, she's everything in the world to me. We had to make a decision about her family. And we believe family comes first. That's the most important part about all this, is taking care of the people that we love. So for us to take care of our family, we moved to Bedford. It wasn't a political decision, as some people want to try and make it out to be. We said almost 2 years ago that we were going to make this decision for personal reasons to come on down. And then we made the decision to actually run for the Senate again, because we're doing some great work and would love to get your support and continue it, to cut your taxes, to make sure you can buy insurance across state lines, to make sure you can feed your family and pay your mortgage. Government's supposed to be about solving problems. It's supposed to be about solutions. I've continued to lay out solution after solution and how we fix it, how we make it smaller, how we make it more answerable to you. And my opponent really hasn't done a whole lot of that. I believe that's what you're looking for. With Ray White's support, with the House support, with the great support you've given me so far, I will work hard for you every single day. You call, I'll be there. And together, we'll make New Hampshire great again.
Lee?
Yes, thank you very much. I think that what I've seen here tonight, and I hope that the voters of Bedford would agree, is that the conservative talk show host Rich Gerard's analysis of Andy Sanborn, the human being, is accurate. He's a magician. He's a man of sleight of hand, of misrepresentation, and of untruths and systematic deceptions and misrepresentations, and I'll leave it at that. I'm completely the opposite person. In February and March, I was very worried about the incivility, the lack of collegiality, the lack of bipartisanship that was being demonstrated in Concord by individuals such as Andy Sanborn. He is a person that has a Tea Party agenda. He is endorsed by the Tea Party in New Hampshire. There's an article in the Bedford Patch on August 8 in which, in the same paragraph, he is endorsed along with Frank Szabo, the notorious Republican primary candidate. He, along with Mr. Szabo, were the choices of the New Hampshire Tea Party, and he proudly wears the Tea Party badge, and I want it affixed to his heart. Bedford means a lot to me. I am Bedford, Bedford is me. I was married at the Bedford Presbyterian Church, and in the most tragic event of my life, my son Cliff, who was tragically drowned at the age of 15, had his memorial service where some of the greatest people in New Hampshire and across the country were there, and I had the honor that night of, that afternoon, of speaking in eulogy to Cliff. John Lynch was there that day. He'd been elected governor of New Hampshire 3 days earlier. I model myself after John Lynch. Do you want a state senator like Governor John Lynch, 8 years of meeting his fiduciary duties and being a friend of small business in New Hampshire? Or do you want an individual like Andy Sanborn, the master of sleight of hand and the darling of this Tea Party? I know why I'm here.
Gentlemen, the debate is now over. Thank you, Lee Nyquist. Thank you, Andy Sanborn, for your participation. Best of luck to both of you as your campaigns near their end. This Tell It Like It Is show could not have happened without the advance help of my co-producer, Jerry Benuck, nor without the full participation of my director and cinematographer, Michael Currier of Castle Hill Media. Thanks for control room assistance and production by BCTV station manager Bill Jennings and assistant manager Coleen Richardson. A very special thanks goes to Steve Delahunty of Lightfoot Clocks for his expert help today in providing and operating electronic timing devices. Thanks must also go to Bedford School Superintendent Tim Mays and to Bedford High School for the use of the beautiful lecterns used by the candidates tonight.
That's for sure.
This debate has been taped and will be rebroadcast on a regular BCTV Channel 16 weekly schedule. It will also be available as a video on demand on the BCTV website at www.bedfordtv.com. Please join us here tomorrow night at 7 p.m. when the nominees for the Governor's Executive Council will debate. And please mark your calendars to vote on Tuesday, November 6th. Thank you so much for watching Tell It Like It Is this evening. And until next time, bye-bye and good night.